Welcome to the Damn Parenting Podcast. I am Evie, your host, and I'm really glad you're here. And honestly, I think you will be too, once you've had a moment to breathe. This is the very first episode of 2026 with a guest, and instead of telling you how to be better or do better or finally get everything together this year, we're going to do something different. All January, we're going to be focusing on supporting our community by our community, because parenting is hard, and parenting far from your home, much harder. Parenting while translating school emails, managing visas, and wondering why everyone else seems calmer than you. Yeah, we see you. This episode is for the parents whose brains never fully switch off. The ones who lie in bed exhausted, but wide awake. The ones who feel like they're always almost about to catch up, but never quite. And if your brain runs on a 24/7 tab system, this one is for you. Tiny heads up before we start. This episode might emotionally sneak up on you. So if you're multitasking or rushing somewhere or mentally doing tomorrow's to-do list, that's okay. Just listen gently for now and let it land where it lands. Then, when you get a pocket of quietness later today or this week, whenever, come on back with a warm drink, a notebook, or just 5 uninterrupted minutes where no one needs a snack. Because this episode isn't meant to just be heard. It's meant to be felt at your own pace. So the thing is, parenting stress is not just about being tired. Research shows that when parents don't really get real recovery from stress, it affects everyone, our well-being and our kids, including their behavior and connection. But the good news is there is hope. Mindful parenting and mindfulness-based tools have been shown to reduce stress and improve parent-child relationships. And no, that doesn't mean sitting cross-legged on a mountain while your kids magically behave. Which brings me to today's conversation. My guest is Rachel Forster, a therapist many of you might recognize from Mama Social. She's someone who has helped countless overwhelmed parents reconnect with themselves without judgment, pressure, or pretending everything's fine. Today, we're going to be talking about anxiety, stress, and what happens when the parenting brain it just doesn't turn off. Stay until the end. You might leave with a breathing exercise, a gentle perspective shift, or simply the reminder, you're not broken. These episodes are not about fixing you, because you don't need fixing. They're about supporting you with compassion, grace, and just space to be. Let's begin. So welcome, Rachel.
Hi.
Hi, Rachel. Well, we all know parenthood involves stress, but when does parenting stress shift into anxiety or chronic overwhelm? And what are common signs parents tend to overlook?
Some element of parenting stress and anxiety is completely normal, and there are healthy levels of that anxiety. So the difference between a healthy level of anxiety and an unhealthy level is when stress and anxiety stops being situational and proportional and instead becomes ongoing, consuming, and really hard to switch off. So an example of healthy levels of stress or anxiety is when you've had a really hard day, you're feeling stretched, thin, or tired, but you do recover after some rest, support, time away. If there's something coming up that is particularly a cause of worry or stress, it could be something like to do with your child's first day at school, these kind of milestones. That's in proportion because that's something new. The brain goes into plan mode, trying to take care of things. And after the event, you also feel a lowering of the feeling of stress and anxiety. And you can still enjoy moments of your day with your child or at work with friends, with yourself, even on really hard days. So it really does shift into a space where you may need some extra support when there's not that break. And when it's not proportional to what's happening in daily life around you. And some of these common signs that we can overlook are things like some physical symptoms. It could be a racing heart, shortness of breath, tight or heavy chest, headaches, sleep issues, muscle tension, just feeling very tense, often in the shoulder area, the neck, headaches, even stomach issues, feeling like digestion just isn't going as well as it usually does, as well as some more mental symptoms, such as the excessive worry, feeling more irritable, maybe snapping more at your partner, your family, trouble concentrating, and just a general feeling of down or kind of a more negative mindset than you're used to having. And it can even come up in some behaviors. So, like avoidance, procrastination, and again, like sometimes a general crankiness of behavior. And these things are really easy to overlook because isolated, we can have a bad night's sleep, we can have a headache, we can often have a day when digestion is upside down, and it can be an accumulative effect. So it can start small, it can start like, oh, this isn't feeling so good today. But it's when they kind of become bigger and then become ongoing, where we can take it as a sign that we might need some additional support. We might need to zoom out a little bit and see where we could make some changes, or often just talk to someone about how we're feeling and work through it.
So, especially for the audience here who are living abroad or especially in a different culture, as parents, we tend to carry what we feel is maybe extra weight mentally, emotionally, or socially when we compare ourselves to other people. What kind of pressure is unique to our community of international families?
It can come from many different places as a family living in a different country. So, a few of these places, a few of the kind of like extra pressure zones can come from navigating two or more different cultures at once. That can be a bit of a mental balancing act of how do we want to integrate? How do we want to keep maybe cultures from one parent, both parents, and finding a balance, making choices around that? It can be pressure from being in a new place where maybe one parent or both parents haven't grown up. We've not been children in the Netherlands, perhaps. So the school system might be completely new. School kind of interactions might be different from our home culture. So it's figuring out how to navigate all of these things in a way that obviously as parents, we want the best for our children and want it to be kind of as seamless as possible. There can be extra pressure of also not having family close by. We can find ourselves in a position of having that extra pressure of kind of no easy plan B for childcare. If you're sick, for example, and you know that if you're at home, close to family, grandparents or somebody else in the family could step in for a few hours and give a little bit of a break. However, being in a place away from family, you know that there's not an easy plan B when things are getting difficult, and when that could have been a nice kind of bit of relief during your week or your day when things are a bit stressful. And then there's also missing back home. So missing out on family occasions, milestones, and knowing that that time you have together is maybe limited to trips back or family visiting. And I think it comes with also being in an international city, being an international family, that some of our close connections we make here with other families, it can be really hard when they might make the decision to move away. And it can feel a bit like a constant rebuilding of the community you have around you, making new friends as a family for your kids. That does take time and energy. There's a study I saw that says it takes around 300 hours to consider someone a really good friend. And it can be really tricky to then say goodbye. So there's a lot of emotional, mental, and social load that can kind of take up our mental space in a way that can be hard to put into words. And it can lead to feelings of isolation, exhaustion, pressure to do it all. And I think there's often not really the bandwidth sometimes to even acknowledge that when tired parents with busy lives. So that can be really tough.
So, speaking of tough, can you help us then? Can you guide us through something quite simple and grounding? Something that we can do together now while people are listening and they can maybe do it themselves to help reset a racing mind or an anxious body?
Yes, I can share two approaches. So one is a grounding exercise and one is a quick breathing exercise. So I'll share these two because it's all about finding a grounding exercise that you like and that suits you. There are so many different approaches. The main aim of all of them is to slow down. So, this is the easiest and quickest way to reset a racing mind or an anxious body. It's to find a way to slow yourself down. So, let's start with the grounding technique. It is 3 things that you see, 3 things that you hear, and move gently 3 parts of your body. So, if we do it together, I can share examples. We can share examples together, maybe, of 3 things that you see. So, Eva, would you like to start with 3 things that you can see around you?
Well, obviously, the Christmas tree, my cup of tea, and you on my screen.
Lovely. Then we move on to 3 things that you hear. So, I can hear my dog breathing. I can hear a car outside. And I can hear kind of a faint hum of some kind of electrical item around me. And finally, move 3 parts of the body gently. So this can be even done sitting down. It can be moving an eyebrow. So I'm going to start by moving my my eyebrows really gently, just up and down.
I have to say, this looks quite comical seeing you move your eyebrows up and down.
And move my shoulders. I'll do a slow roll of the shoulders up and down. And then I will just move my hands and my wrists slowly. And I've chosen those because they're often where I keep tension. So in my forehead, around my shoulders and neck, and sometimes even my hands, I can get a bit clenchy. So just to kind of loosen the body and release some of the anxious tension that might be there. And then a quick breathing exercise.
Before you go any further, we had
Yes.
this chat already. Breathing is not for everyone. And I know that sounds so very strange to hear, but breathing exercises are not easy. And I've done breathing workshops and exercises with professionals, but it takes so much effort. So I just want to say for anyone listening, don't worry. If you don't feel like you're getting anything out of this, don't worry about it. You know why? Because you need someone to be there with you to show you properly where to breathe in and how to breathe in. And so I just want to give a heads up to anyone doing this. Breathing's not for everyone. So it's not for me usually, but I'm willing to give it a go.
Totally agree. I'm so glad you said that. I'm also not a big fan of breathing. There's so much to say of the benefits and how positive it can be if it's something that clicks for you. I personally know that I hold a lot of the tension in my body. So I like to do quite a physical thing. But let's try a breathing exercise to share. I'm going to share a really simple one in case breathing is something that people like. But yeah, you're right. It does need a little bit of instruction of where to breathe in the body properly. So this one is 4, 7, 8. And the key to most breathing exercises is to exhale for longer than you inhale. The reason being that it just slows everything right down and it can help the body reach that nice state of rest and restoration. So moving out of fight or flight quite effectively. So with the 4, 7, 8 method, it's breathing in for 4 through the nose, holding for 7, and breathing out of the mouth really slowly for 8 or thereabouts. So we try breathing in through the nose for 4, holding for 7, and when you've got this 7 seconds, try to make sure that the air is really at the bottom of your lungs, in the belly, and that your ribs have expanded outwards. You can even put your hands there to see. And then a really slow breath out for 8 through the mouth. You should be able to feel the sides of your ribs go back again and relax. How did that feel?
Yeah, I have to say, even doing the podcast for however many episodes now, I still have an issue trying to breathe properly anyway. So I'm always out of breath. It's now January. Everyone talks about resolutions. That is not what this is about. But what I would like to ask you is how can actually parents make space for their own needs and mental health, even if they feel guilty for taking time for themselves?
Yeah, it's really important topic because guilt is something that so many parents do feel. So I'd like to share two things. One is to reframe the feeling of guilt, and the second one is to get specific about what your own needs actually are. So there's a talk that I heard recently where it was describing guilt as actually being tension of the tension of wanting to be in two places at once, of wanting to be there for the kids, feeling the pressure to be with the family, do things with them, for them, and the tension of actually internally feeling like you need some time for yourself and you need to attend to your own needs in that moment too. So I think that's a nice wider perspective to have when it comes to the feeling of guilt, that it's actually because I've got two needs happening at the same time. And then when it comes to getting specific about what you do need, that can help a lot when it comes to taking however much time you have, which sometimes isn't much time at all, to be able to focus on what you need. So it can be asking yourself the question of, what do I actually need right now? And how can I possibly achieve it? This is also a tricky thing of the achieving part, because it might be after the kids are in bed, you get the time to focus on your own needs. And at that point, can't really leave the house, leave them in the house alone. It might be late. You might have very little energy, but you still have the needs going on. So it's also finding opportunities of how to meet your needs. So an example might be that you've been with the kids all day. You notice you're just craving some social time. You might be craving some time of talking to your friends, having an adult conversation. There might be something that happened that you just want to talk about, and you know you need your friends to have this vent moment. And you might not feel like a phone call, or you might not be able to go out and meet someone last minute in the evening. You might not have the energy for that. So maybe it's finding a grey area of meeting the needs in a low effort way. Maybe instead it's sending a voice note. Maybe it's, sending a text. It might be planning in, making the first steps to plan in a meetup with a friend for in a few days' time and giving yourself that moment of, yeah, this is what I can do now for myself.
Do you remember that research that came out recently where women were suggested to meet up every 22 days on average to vent because it was shown to be very good for their mental health?
I didn't, but I can imagine how that study was put together.
Yeah, it basically says they're not fun. It's actually about essential and it helps them feel more balanced.
I can relate.
So, what does connecting to our authentic self mean in the context of parenting, especially when it comes to our identity? Because we have so many identities as mother or father, parent, caretaker, planner, chauffeur, backfeet cyclist, whatever it might be.
So true. So, as you've already explained very nicely, as a parent, we can find ourselves very busy in all of the roles of parent, caretaker, planner, backfeet driver, putting other people's needs first. And it can become then a feeling of disconnection with ourselves when we've been doing things for other people for so long. So, finding our kind of authentic self again is the part of us that lives outside of responsibilities and the to-do list. So our authentic self is made up of our interests, preferences, personal goals, values, our needs, wants, desires, dreams, everything that can change also after having kids. Often we find our values and our priorities can drastically change. So it can be a process of rediscovery and navigating that while also discovering how to fill in these roles of being a parent and having those responsibilities. So I think an easy way to reconnect with our authentic self, feel our identity again, is to ask ourselves some simple questions of, what do I need right now? How am I feeling right now? What are my values currently? What is important to me? And what gives me energy? How do I want my days to look and feel? And it can be a list that people can write down. It could be in the notes app of your phone. You can write it down on a piece of paper and giving yourself permission to explore, acknowledge, create space for your needs, recognize that things might have changed, and then finding a way to add what is important to you into your day or your week, into your life in a way that's realistic. So, like, I come back to this kind of like evening time, feeling tired is the time when most parents do have some alone time. And it might be also the time when you have 5% in the tank. It's not the most energetic time of day usually. So, it's creating some options for yourself based on what is important to you that you know is going to be within the capacity that you have at the time. So we're stepping away from overachieving and being very ambitious with things and making it just realistic, achievable, and flexible.
If a listener is now thinking, I don't have time for therapy, or even waiting on one of those goddamn wait lists that we always have to do, or we don't have, time for those fancy tools that people keep touting, what's a tiny practice that they could maybe try? And, maybe it might work for them or maybe it won't, that you would actually recommend right now?
I recommend self-talk of noticing what's going on with yourself, with your mind, with your body, and noticing how you're talking to yourself. So it's really easy to start talking to ourselves with an inner critic, with a more negative voice. And I like to start with self talk because the way we speak to ourselves has such a direct impact on our thoughts, our emotions, and our behavior. So if we're able to talk to ourselves in a more gentle way, in a more supportive way, and with compassion, it can be really impactful for then changing our mindset, our perspective, and we can live a bit more of a slowed down, gentle, and positive day. It can be in a moment when you know you're getting stressed. Some things that I personally like to do is firstly name it to tame it. I might say, oh, I'm feeling really stressed right now. I'm just accepting this is a stressful moment. So, speaking to yourself with acceptance and self compassion can really help to slow a racing mind, to actually give yourself self care because you're caring about how you're speaking to yourself. And you're showing care to yourself in that moment through self compassion. And you're showing care to yourself through letting yourself feel whatever emotion it is that you have. And that can go a really long way without any fancy tools or without spending any extra time on waiting lists and doing other exercises. It really all starts with the way we speak to ourselves and how we feel about ourselves. And a final exercise is a butterfly hug. So if things are just feeling anxious, tense, racing fast, a nice way to slow down and calm the mind and body is to cross the arms over so they're touching the shoulders or top of the arms, and then very gently and slowly alternate taps left and right in a rhythmic movement. This works both sides of the brain at once, and it just really helps to focus your attention on yourself and slowing down.
I feel like that's an extremely accessible and easy thing to do, even when the kids are running around screaming in the room.
Yes. And they can even join in too.
I feel that one. With the self-talk, do you have any recommended examples that you can give us of kindness to ourselves? Because I, for one, when people tell me that, I honestly come up blank with, it's not a natural thing for someone with a critical mind.
Yeah, it's not always easy or natural, especially in the moment when you already have the inner critic loud in your head. So I have some examples, and I also recommend when you have a minute to just write some down where it's accessible, like the notes app of your phone. So in that moment, you don't have to think. You can just press a button and it's there. Some examples I have that I like to use is telling myself whatever I'm feeling. So it could be, I'm stressed right now, or this feels like a lot right now, or I'm feeling anxious and I'm doing the best I can. Another one that I'm telling myself sometimes is, I don't have to get everything perfectly right to be a good parent. Because sometimes the inner critic can come up a lot for me when I'm being critical of my own parenting choices. So I like to remind myself that getting it all perfect is not achievable, and I'm doing the best I can. Another one is, I can often find myself telling myself off for feeling stressed or anxious in a way that I'm like, oh, why are you feeling stressed right now? Why are you feeling anxious? And that never helps. So the flip one to that one is when I tell myself, it makes sense that I'm stressed right now, or it makes sense that I feel upset in this moment because this is hard. Naming it to tame it, accepting how I feel, and giving myself some self-compassion of, hard, I'm doing my best. Or this is the best I can do with the capacity I have in this moment.
Well, thank you for sharing your moment with us, Rachel. And it's a delight to have you finally on Damn Parenting, especially at the start of the new year to help people regulate. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for inviting me on. It has been a pleasure.
So truly thank you for reminding us that stress doesn't have to be, the default setting, I guess, even if it sometimes feels like it's pre-installed with us with parenthood. But if you're listening to this and something resonated, maybe it was a sentence, or maybe it was the breath work. Maybe it was just a moment you realized that you actually haven't breathed properly all day. That's enough. And that's the start. You're not behind or broken. You're doing one of the hardest jobs there is, and often in another language, and in another system, and in another culture. And you're doing it with care and heart. If you'd like to explore more of Rachel's work, you can find her online at rachelforstertherapy.com or on Instagram at a very practical handle of therapy.with.rachel. Both of these will be in our show notes and on our Instagram. And if this episode felt helpful, please share it with another parent who might be carrying heavy thoughts right now. Because none of us were meant to do this alone. Even the ones who look like they've even got it all together, they might need help too. Now, a little look ahead. All this month, we're releasing episodes that are building blocks support for our community by our community. And they're not meant to be binged, and they're not meant to be completed, and they're definitely not for everyone, all of the time. But maybe one will land with you. Maybe not today, right now, but maybe on a tough Tuesday in 3 weeks from now, when your coffee's gone cold and your patience has run out. And when that moment comes, we'll be here. This community will be here, ready, waiting, and with no judgment. Because needing help isn't something to be ashamed of. Asking for support is not a failure. It's all growth, and it's curiosity, and it's saying, I care enough to want to feel a little lighter. So take what you need from this episode, leave the rest. And you can always come back whenever you're ready. You're always welcome here. I'll speak with you next week when we are joined by Ellen Johnson, the founder of Evergreen Coaching and Consulting, who's going to take us on to the next step. Finding our path and finding the alignment we need to help with 2026 to be a more fulfilling year for us as parents. Till then.